After that first night, Zoey came to expect Blaine's nightly phone calls from Mexico City. His reports were largely positive. Blaine would tell Zoey how many people he'd been able to save on his operating table and the additional good news of rescue operations he heard had been successful. He would also tell her that sufficient supplies were beginning to arrive in the city and that more roads and highways were cleared. Their phone calls were usually no longer than 15 minutes, sometimes much less. Zoey understood that Blaine didn't want to disrupt her sleep, and she knew that the intensity of his days meant he also needed to rest. But she couldn't help wishing they were longer. Zoey had long ago admitted to herself, if not him, how much she missed him. Still, even a short call from Blaine helped to alleviate her worries, and she found that after hearing Blaine's voice each night, she would quickly drift off to sleep after they hung up the phone. Until the night Blaine's phone calls stopped. Zoey waited and waited that night, but Blaine didn't call, and Zoey barely slept. She tried to rationalize not hearing from Blaine. She told herself he was working especially late or had fallen asleep early by mistake, but Zoey couldn't stop her growing dread. By the next evening, as she paced the hospital corridor outside of Max's hospital room, she felt herself growing more and more panicked. She couldn't calm herself down no matter how hard she tried. Seeing that Max was asleep, Zoey slipped into the empty visitors' lounge and changed the TV hanging on the wall to a cable news channel. It was the top of the hour, and Zoey felt a chill go down her spine as she listened to the news anchor report the top story. There is more disturbing news out of Mexico City today as aftershocks of the 8.1 earthquake that devastated the region have continued to be a cause for concern. We are receiving reports that last night at approximately 1 o'clock a.m., another aftershock of 5.1 rocked the city, with 43 new missing persons reported and 4 new deaths adding to the already devastating casualty numbers in the country. Zoey's whole body began to shiver, and it felt as if the entire hospital's temperature had dropped 20 degrees and her hands were cold. The news anchor said the aftershock had hit at 1 o'clock a.m. last night, around the time Blaine usually called her. Could he have been caught in an aftershock? Zoey checked her watch. It was 10 o'clock p.m. She told herself last night was just a fluke, a horrible coincidence, and that he would call tonight. Still shivering, Zoey returned to Max's hospital room and lay down on the bed alongside their son. Max immediately rolled over and snuggled into her, never waking, and Zoey felt some of her chills disappear. She clutched her phone in one hand and wrapped her arms tightly around her sleeping son as she settled in to wait for Blaine to call. If he called. At that thought, Zoey couldn't hold back any longer, and her tears began to flow uncontrollably. Clutching Max, Zoey whispered into his little ear, "Sweetheart, pray with Mommy that Daddy will return home safely." Her voice was choked with sobs. More and more tears flowed as she held her sleeping son. Was it Zoey's fate to have all the people she loved taken away from her one by one? Was she destined to lose both the man she loved and their son? Zoey hardly slept all night. She soaked her pillow with tears and checked her phone more times than she could count. But another night passed with no call from Blaine. She could no longer deny what her gut told her was the truth. Something bad had happened. Those first 2 nights turned into 5 nights with no word from Blaine. It was as if he had vanished from Zoey's life. She had gone to St. Mary's to inquire about their team in Mexico City, but the hospital had no comment. Their only response was that communications out of Mexico City were erratic, and no one in Phoenix knew the exact situation on the ground in Mexico City. It was now the 6th day since Zoey had heard from Blaine, and she was sitting in front of her computer drawing blueprints in a daze. 10 minutes ago, she'd been told by Talon that she had made an error in the budget estimate she had already presented to her client, and the company would have to absorb the cost. It was the first time Zoey had ever made such an error, so Talon had been reasonable, if disappointed. Zoey offered to pay the difference out of her salary, but he'd said that Taylor Interiors would absorb the cost this time, but to be more careful in the future. Talon's thoughtful response only made Zoey feel guiltier. Not being able to control her emotions any longer, Zoey got up from her desk and went to the restroom. She locked the door behind her and cried while tearfully dialing Blaine's cell phone nonstop. "Sorry, the user you dialed is temporarily out of service. Please hang up and try again later." Beep, beep, beep. "Sorry, the number you dialed is temporarily out of service. Please hang up and..." Zoey pressed the key again and again, and the same cold mechanical voice answered her. The voice sounded to Zoey as if it had come from the depths of hell, and her heart was in excruciating pain. She clutched her phone with both hands and left a message for Blaine while sobbing. "Blaine, where are you? Hurry up and call me, okay? I can't do anything without you. I miss you so much. I really miss you so much. I miss you so much." Zoey's words were so choked with sobs, she knew that even if by some miracle Blaine got her message, he wouldn't be able to make out a word she was saying because of her uncontrollable weeping. After work, Zoey went to the supermarket even though she hadn't had an appetite for days. She was pushing her cart down the aisle in a daze when suddenly her cell phone rang. Ring! The ringtone sounded like the voice of hope as it urgently called out to Zoey. Zoey was shocked. She quickly dropped the items in her hands and grabbed her phone out of her purse. When she saw the caller ID, she was overjoyed, and her eyes immediately turned wet as a rush of excited thoughts went through her. The call was from Mexico City. It was the number of the phone booth he used. It was him. It was Blaine. Blaine was fine. Zoey hurriedly pressed the answer button and shouted into the phone, "Blaine!" "Zoey, it's me." A slightly unfamiliar voice responded, causing Zoey to be stunned momentarily. "It's José." "José?" Zoey immediately became apprehensive. José's voice was always high and lively. Why did he sound so depressed today? Why would you call me?" Zoey tried her best to relax her emotions so her tone didn't sound weird. However, her voice shook, betraying her emotions and her nervousness. She clutched the phone in her hands so hard, her fingers turned white. Zoey wanted to lie and sound calm, but she just couldn't.
Hi, Zoey here. If you are wondering what happens next, then download the Pocket FM app and listen to the exciting episodes of Rekindled Heartache now.